I've talked a lot about potential interactions between Xenoblade 1 and 2 characters, and have alluded to the idea of the two games taking place in the same universe for probably a year now at this point. However, I've never really outright stated everything about that and why I think that's possible and that stuff, so that's what I'm going to do here. You might already guess that there's the bunch of caveats in there, and the two games as we play them don't take place in the same universe, but in order to fully explain this, I'm going to need to spoil the ever-loving Xenosaga Episode 3 Jesus out of both Xenoblades 1 and 2, so be aware of that. There's a lot of stuff coming. The general gist is that at the end of both games, you have victory at somewhat of a cost. The villain is defeated and the lives of all the characters and all the inhabitants of the world are saved, but the world itself is in trouble, and it ends up being recreated in the final scene, and you get to see the main cast being like, yes, this is good, I enjoy not being dead. And the general theory is that these two new worlds are actually one and the same, and the casts of Xenoblades 1 and 2, as well as all the NPCs and all the generic inhabitants of their worlds, are now inhabiting the same planet after the end of the two games. In Xenoblade 1, without any of the gods to sustain it, the universe has become stagnant and is falling apart. Shulk asks Alvis to recreate it in a sense that doesn't require any more gods, and he does so. At the end of Xenoblade 2, Klaus uses the last of his Zohar power. Yes, the Conduit and the Zohar are basically the same thing. I'm gonna call it Zohar because that's what more of the other games call it. Shut up. He uses his power to blow away the Cloud Sea and reveal a continent that all of the great nation titans of Alres fuse with, and presumably is the landmass that all of the characters are going to live out the rest of their days on. So, how are these the same planet? Well, there is no absolute proof, but I do have a pretty reasonable explanation, and it's going to give a lot of the burden of proof to Xenoblade 1, because 2's explanation is pretty simple. Alrest was already Earth, or what was left of it after the Klaus incident, as I like to call it. Klaus designed and made the Cloud Sea to fix the damage he'd done to the surface of the planet. The island that you see in the ending cutscene that the Titans fuse with was just a part of the world, an island that had already been cleared of all the influence from the past world and just would make a good place for humanity to start over again. It is an island, actually two islands, on Earth, and there you go. That part of the world was clean. Klaus just teleported everyone there, got rid of the Cloud Sea, directed the Titans to fuse with it, and there you go. They've got all the land of Alres that was left, plus this entire new island to make their home and to continue living on Earth. Humanity's back. It took millennia and probably millions of years, but good job, Klaus. You almost sort of fixed things. So, time for the much harder part. How could the Xenoblade 1 cast and characters and Colony 9 end up on Earth? Well, we do already know that there are tons of strong connections to the universe Xenoblade 1 takes place in, and Alrest, Earth, Xenoblade 2 world, whatever you want to call it. First off, they both have half of Klaus. One just happened to go evil maniacal god and name himself Zenza. They also both have Aegises in them because, and this is no longer open to debate, Alvis is Ontos and is able to still channel Zohar power across the dimensional lines. Based on context from both games, we can tell that the Xenoblade 1 universe is either just an alternate dimension that didn't have much form or shape to it when Alvis first teleported there, or a pocket dimension, or just straight up a simulation created by Alvis. When the Klaus incident happened, half of Klaus, as well as Galea's soul, if not her actual body, got teleported into the same dimension or whatever Alvis was in. They became the gods and used his power, or the Zohar through Alvis, to shape this universe as they saw fit as the gods, and then, Xenoblade 1 happened. So, the world decaying after Zenza died makes sense. We know from the Xenoblade 2 side of things that Zenza dying also kills Klaus, and it was Klaus's life force that was tying the Zohar to that universe, so once he died, it would depart, and the Aegises would lose most of their power, which means that, yes, the world created by Ontos would start falling apart, and he would look to Shulk as the new god to try and think of something to do quickly so all of the people of the universe would still have somewhere to live at some point. Shulk asked for a world with no need for gods, and Alvis, who was sort of able to keep dibs on things in the other universe, if Klaus was able to tell that the other half of his body was about to die, Alvis was probably able to tell most of the things that were happening on the other side of the dimensional portal. The only reason Malos and Numa didn't know was because they were awakened as Blades, so they didn't have access to the full memory of their processors, basically. So, it's likely that Alvis could have just been, hey look, the Zohar is the closest thing to a god in that other universe I came from. It's gonna go away soon. Why don't we just bring everyone there? That's a lot easier. Pay close attention to the scene where the universe actually gets remade. We know from previous narration and previous game experience that the universe of Xenoblade 1 is a seemingly infinite plane of endless ocean with just the two titans, and I guess the falling arm, as landmasses. Now, I say seemingly because you can't see infinitely far from the top of one of the titans, so it could technically be a very, very giant sphere or a plane that just ends at some point, and there could be other landmasses that are just out of sight, and we don't even know how deep the sea is. It could be something or nothing or infinite depth underneath there. So there's a lot of variables there, but we do know that it's not a planet, basically. During the recreation, though, it does zoom out to show some galactic level stuff, but you can also distinctly see a spherical shell form around the Bionis itself that looks very much like a planet, and if there are stars and galaxies, like, that looks like probably the best representation of actual space you could get on a Wii. So we know that Shulk's new universe he creates, at least allegedly, is something much more akin to the real universe, and everyone got moved to an actual round planet, something you see in just typical fantasy world that's still rooted in actual science. In order to make a universe like this, Alvis would have to know how physics would work in that kind of universe, and his only source for that knowledge would be the time he spent alongside the other Aegises before he warped away to this universe. So it's very likely that if he did actually make an entire infinite universe on his own, it would be heavily modeled after, if not identical, to his and Zanza's memories of the world before. So even if it wasn't the same Earth, they probably did end up on an Earth, if that makes sense. If you think about it, though, like I said before, Alvis would have knowledge of the old universe. He, out of any character, has enough links between the two of them to actually sort of keep dibs on everything that was going on. Again, we didn't hear any of this in Xenoblade 1 because it wasn't written yet, but it's not even making up a retcon that he just wouldn't mention this to Shulk, because Shulk wouldn't understand any of that. He would just know, world in trouble, me have power, let's do something to fix it. And if Alvis said, yes, you made this world, but he just got teleported to another world, he literally wouldn't know the difference. Regardless, though, Alvis would be able to notice, yes, not only does the old universe not have a god, but it's almost identical already to how Zanza and I remember it. The only thing that's actually been changed is Earth, and that's also been sort of fixed now. So it'll be a lot safer, instead of trying to create some infinite thing, just to replicate what I did before and transfer myself between universes, but this time take all of the living inhabitants of this one with me. There is an explosion in the universe recreation scene that could very easily supposed to be a new Big Bang, and it's just the way Alvis did things was really accelerate the evolution of the universe until it got back to a point like now where planets can exist that would harbor life. But that explosion very quickly turns Alvis green, so this could just be a visual representation of the transporting between universes. Ryan confirms that the new Colony 9 is on an ocean coast, different from both the Endless and Aerith seas, neither of which is apparently saltwater. Aerith is kind of weird, but I guess if it's just a big rainwater basin, that makes sense. And the Endless Sea is apparently poison, because if you try to swim too far away from the fallen orb, it just kind of kills you. But neither is saltwater, because Ryan would have had plenty of experience with both of those to know what kind of water was in them, and he's surprised to know that saltwater exists. Which means that this is a bona fide, real-world style ocean. And the only planet we know in the known Xenoblade multiverse that has oceans and islands. Yeah, you got it, it's Xenoblade 2 Earth. So we've established that there is a possibility that they could have ended up on the same planet, but the next question is whether or not XC2's new continent and XC1's new Colony 9 are the same place, or at least on the same continent. You can't see much of the original game's thing, but they do seem to have similar biomes. New Colony 9 is located on a little bay thing that's sorta hemmed in and turned into a bay, not just straight up the ocean, by the corpse of the Bionis, which seems to have been transferred over into the other universe, presumably because almost all life was on Bionis at that point, so Alvis was just like, yup, let's cut and paste instead of copy and paste. Makes it a lot easier than having to detect individual life forms, or something like that. So, you got the head of the Bionis, and that's a pretty distinct landform to look out for, and we could just look for that in the Xenoblade 2 cutscenes. I kinda said it before, but in the end of Xenoblade 2, you actually see 2 islands there. There's a small one that you don't really see much and doesn't do anything, and then the bigger one that the Titans actually fuse with. The big one does have a spike poking out of it the first time you see it, but if you look closely, that's just the wings of some giant Titan. I'm not 100% sure if it's one we visit in the game or just a generic big Titan, because there were definitely other nations besides the ones we went to. And you can see the smaller island in a couple shots, and can easily confirm that it doesn't have anything remotely like the Bionis corpse in it, so no, they're not the same landform or the same island. What we have now, though, is Xenoblade 2 ending on a pair of islands on Earth, and Xenoblade 1 ending on a different landmass that would make a lot of sense to be on Earth. This now means that it's possible to have the cast of the 2 games, or their descendants or something, actually find each other and interact with each other once the 2 civilizations settle down, get used to their new worlds, and then begin exploring beyond their homes. This leaves an immense amount of possibilities for future Xenoblade 3 that can follow up on both 1 and 2 at the same time, while also just telling its own original story in a setting that hasn't been explored yet, because guess what? It's a whole new Earth. Everything is new. Even if you technically just copied it off of old Earth, current Earth, or like predict continental drift and make the world map look like that, it's still something that Xenoblade hasn't done before, and it would be new. And you could also still have some small references or story ties or something tying back to the old games as ancient history or something, and then, I don't know, bring the Zohar back so things can actually happen and it'll actually be a Xeno game or something. There's a lot of things. It could be a close sequel, focus on known characters, or pull a Xenogears, which I think is a lot more likely since Xenoblade 2 injected a lot of gear stuff into the Blade multiverse, and just make it millennia afterwards. The stories of 1 and 2 are myths, everyone's living in one unified civilization, but there we go, reincarnation of Shulk and reincarnation of Rex have to save the world from Telethia blades. I don't know. It would be cool. If anything, it's certainly a place for a ton of new theories, and I'm probably going to have plenty more to go along with it in the future. But of course, the future is not today, because I am done now with this video. Yeah, I don't have anything super special to say. Next week's gonna be a D&D week, so that's gonna be fun. We're gonna have a patron poll up for the next character, probably before this video even goes live for patrons, so vote on that if you're a patron. And speaking of patrons, I would like to thank my patrons for making a lot of things possible, including Xenogears, which I actually have recorded the first play session of. It turned out great, the recording is great, I'm already enjoying the game, I'm very excited, and yeah, I kinda got sidetracked, so thank you to Satsu Ryokoi, Lily Starflame, Dead Pat, new patron Zero with an X and not a Z, so I'm just assuming that's how that's pronounced, Luke John Grande, and Jankles, as well as Barracks, who asked for a shout out for a fanfiction.net page, which you can find a link for in the description, as always. And also, as always, until next time, this is Luxon, signing off.